What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave, and welcome to 2026. It's the first show of the new year, and now that the holidays are behind us, we're back to business as usual with a whole new year in front of us for, I'm sure, all kinds of crazy gaming stories that'll pop up. But today, we have some catching up to do, actually going back even to last week with Nintendo, working to smooth out a situation that had been brewing for a bit now with developers. Seems like they're all caught up, and we'll take a look at that here today. Also, we already talked about Microsoft as they're getting absolutely crushed online, and yes, it has to do with AI and at least a certain statement their CEO put out there. And we'll also be talking about the PlayStation 5 as a new exploit has been discovered or at least announced, and, well, you can guess what it did to the certain game that you need in order to launch the whole thing. We'll go over all of that and more. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button. Helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members for the channel do get Newswave early. If you would like to learn more about that, click the join button or link in the description down below. And we're going to start today with ASUS, as they have announced, like we've seen many companies now going into the new year, that prices are going up. This we can see. This is over on videocards.com with the translation from the statement that was released by ASUS online. And they spent a while building up to this point, just trying to at least show all the things that are causing this. And mostly they're mentioning AI and a lot of the data centers and logistics behind all of that and the parts, saying after carefully reviewing market conditions, supply stability, and our commitments to product quality, and while continuing to invest in technical R&D, ASUS plans to implement strategic price adjustments for certain product combinations starting January 5th, 2026. This adjustment is a necessary decision after absorbing and responding to cost pressure over an extended period. The goal is to ensure stable supply, maintain quality and service levels, and continue supporting your long-term planning for key IT investments. And again, it's not shocking. It's almost expected by most of us now that companies are going to be raising prices because of the squeeze right now happening with DRAM. We see it just outright with RAM, like buying DDR5, but even now falling to DDR4 as demand is shifting to that. So ASUS announcing this, and I assume like their ROG Ally handhelds, those will be going up in price. It just feels like everything around us with a lot of these electronics are expected to jump 10, 20, even 30% in some cases. So this just kind of the tip of the iceberg heading into the new year. Also looks like more evidence is mounting around that Black Flag remake from Ubisoft. This we can see this over on the Hidden Ones social account saying, I was checking to see if Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resync had a domain registered, and it does. It was registered recently, only 25 days ago. Now, they do mention it's a French registrar that's always been Ubisoft's default. They use it all the time across their IPs like Far Cry, Prince of Persia, Assassin's Creed, and more. So it's, again, not shocking. We've heard about this Black Flag Resynced, this remake of Assassin's Creed Black Flag for quite some time. We kind of thought it could be announced at the Game Awards because it's supposed to be coming out this year according to fairly recent reports, and things can change behind the scenes, but now we're all kind of hanging out waiting for what's been one of the worst kept secrets in gaming for the last year to finally get that official announcement. And I think it's going to do very well. It does harken back to the old days of Assassin's Creed that people remember very fondly. Black Flag is still, for many people, one of the top games. So as long as Ubisoft doesn't necessarily mess it up with the remake, and as long as they stick more to the roots of that game and don't get too crazy with some of the changes that I'm sure they'll make to quote-unquote modernize at least the quality of life and controls and other things, they've been able to, I'd say, evolve over time with the Assassin's Creed franchise, they should be okay with it. So I'm thinking it's going to be announced maybe even just randomly by Ubisoft on their social media accounts, and then it's full speed ahead towards the end of this year for the release, or who knows, maybe a little sooner. Oh, and we had already talked about how Grid Legends was announced for the Switch too, but it seems the developers behind the game did take to Reddit to answer some questions, and there was one thing that stuck out to me that I thought was kind of cool. We can see this. This is over on Nintendo Life, who collected some of the answers. Now, one thing was about the performance or the graphics mode, and it does look like it'll be 30 FPS with better visuals and up to 60 FPS if you want to go the performance route and maybe lower some of the resolution or just different highlights on the cars themselves. They also mentioned that battery saver preset, which is interesting. And the thing that I thought was kind of cool, yes, they will be incorporating the GameCube controller here. We've seen this in racing games for the Switch 1, but here it looks like it's going to support that NSO, the Nintendo Switch Online version of the GameCube controller that is wireless and a very, very good recreation of that original controller from the early 2000s. So that'll be great because it will offer the analog trigger support, and that is something that works very, very well for racing games. Digital triggers not as great when it comes to just being able to accelerate, feather the throttle, that kind of thing. So I guess for this, it can break out the GameCube controller and relive it like the old days in 2001. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Nintendo and an issue they've been sort of dealing with on and off when it comes to the Switch 2 and development behind the scenes. Now, this was brought up last year now, and a few days ago, we turned to 2026, but yeah, it was last year. 6 or 7 months ago, there was a lot of discussion around how Nintendo was being kind of picky with who got development kits early on. And it seemed like that was affecting third-party development. And now, looking back on it, it does kind of line up, because all of a sudden we're starting to see some games appear kind of out of nowhere, with them, even these versions for the Switch 2, even making the predetermined or pre-announced release dates for other systems. Now we can see this. This is from Nate, who was responding to a person over on, I believe, Fama Boards, saying, in the case of COD, it doesn't mean they got a dev kit super late either, just late enough that they couldn't get the work done to launch the game sooner. The dev kit delivery situation has largely been resolved, and this is something that, again, has been really talked about behind the scenes more and more recently. That Nintendo is starting to get dev kits out to these different developers, these different publishers. I mean, of course, they're gonna have partners that are much closer than others that got dev kits, I mean, almost right away, or as soon as they could. And now look at Capcom. They're going crazy. All of a sudden, Pragmata is making a release on the Switch 2. Resident Evil 9, which I think is going to be a big showing for the Switch 2, the hybrid system, right alongside the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series. That's a big get for the Switch 2, and it seems like Capcom starting to really wake up for the system. But, I mean, we're starting to see other games also just kind of appear, like just for the Switch 2 with these different versions. We talked about Grid Legends, random out of left field, but it's like, oh, okay, yeah, we're going to start seeing these different games maybe ported even from that Xbox One or PS4 era more and more as these studios get development kits. But the biggest thing would be these day one releases that we're starting to see, again, Capcom kind of set that standard. With the dev kits getting out there, and we see this sort of align with more and more development schedules that take longer, I mean, as we've ever seen in gaming, the Switch 2 can kind of work in there with its dev kit, and all of a sudden, you start seeing that logo more often than not with some of these big AAA games. Because it is becoming kind of clear now that the Switch 2 is, I mean, it's not PS5 level in terms of visuals and frame rate combined, but we're seeing a lot of these games get cut to even 30 FPS, and then visually speaking, it's that good enough status for people because of how convenient the Switch 2 is. And even PC gaming handhelds outright, yeah, they even tend to be more expensive when we see a $1,000 handheld that might struggle at 1080p for some of these games, but the convenience factor is enough for people to go, all right, maybe it's not a PS5 Pro level with visuals, it's close though, and then I can also take it on the go if I want, or not take up the TV. There's a pretty significant value that's assigned for that for many people to have that choice. So the Switch 2, if it can just handle some of these games with dev kits getting out there more and more, and we start seeing it just get announced for third-party games that wouldn't have on the Switch 1, that's going to be big for Nintendo when it comes to the third-party scene. So I guess we're going to see here, especially 2026, if that is the case, as dev kits get out there much more. And I mean, Call of Duty seems to be one of the big ones, but then also Microsoft, as they are starting to wake up as well with things like South of Midnight and Indiana Jones. So keep an eye on them. Next up, let's talk about Microsoft, as they were getting crushed online over the weekend. And a lot of this seemed to be coming from Satya Nadella, the CEO at Microsoft, who I'm sure even in gaming, you're starting to hear more and more, because it kind of feels like he is almost running the gaming side now more than ever, and Phil Spencer's just kind of there along for the ride now. So AI being a big focus for Microsoft across all their divisions, and again, even with gaming, we're starting to see it get tied in quite a bit there. But Satya Nadella put out, it was kind of a reflection for the year that just passed and the year that's upcoming. Yes, all about AI, since that is what Microsoft is just about all in on right now. And he said one thing in particular that had the internet rolling its eyes and then basically just making fun of Microsoft sense. So let's take a look. This was posted over on his LinkedIn. It's kind of like a scratch pad where he just kind of wrote out some of these thoughts, saying, as I reflect on the past year and look forward to the one ahead, there's no question 2026 will be a pivotal year for AI. Yes, another one. But this moment feels different in a few notable ways. We have moved past the initial phase of discovery and are entering a phase of widespread diffusion. We are beginning to distinguish between spectacle and substance. We now have a clearer sense of where the tech is headed, but also the harder and more important question of how to shape its impact on the world. And he goes on to list some other factors as well, but he gets to this line: we need to get beyond the arguments of slop versus sophistication and develop a new equilibrium in terms of our theory of the mind and accounts for humans being equipped with these new cognitive amplifier tools as we relate to each other. So I will say, Satya Nadella did kind of frame this as AI being that amplifier tool, not as a replacement. And that's something people are still coming to, or at odds with right now, are struggling to even try to come to terms with, because it seems more and more like when it comes to Wall Street, stock market, CEOs, they're kind of looking at AI as how much salary can I cut with AI replacing these agentic AI, as they're calling it, where you basically have a bot or an agent that can do the work of entry-level positions, and that cuts down on hiring. And that's, I mean, if you think about it in a free market, that's what you would expect a lot of these companies to do. But with Satya Nadella, it's like, hey, it's more amplifier. It's a tool. It's like getting a calculator instead of having to write everything out by hand and figure out a problem that way, right? So now looking at it as basically, don't call it slop. And that's, look, when you tell the internet that, and when they're already memeing and making fun of AI as AI slop and stuff, they're going to do it more. And unfortunately for Microsoft, that then turned into micro slop. And it blew up online, and people are just making fun of Microsoft then. And look, Microsoft already struggles when it comes to the Xbox side with online reception. The last thing you need is it to be the microslop Xbox. It's not helping the cause. So AI, it's very clear, is becoming more and more ingrained in the world outright. Just so many people are using it now. You see the usage stats for things like just ChatGPT, but then think about how whenever you open a Google tab on Chrome, there's the little AI assistant Gemini thing. Think about how in Microsoft, they're with Windows, they're trying to get their Copilot on everything. It's hard to miss, and it's pretty clear that the powers that be, the big companies, want it to be ingrained just completely. So it's going to be an interesting year, I will say that. But you tell people not to call it slop, and then they're just going to fire back and call you micro slop. So this is a good start to the year for Satya Nadella. Next up, let's talk about a PlayStation 5 exploit that was revealed during New Year's Eve. And this is for a certain game that then soared in the secondhand market. That's Star Wars Racer's Revenge, and it's specifically the physical PlayStation 4 copy. The digital one does not work, and unfortunately, the physical version is limited run games, so there's a few thousand of these things out there in the market. And then there's some, of course, that people don't want to sell and they're holding on to, so cut down that even further. And you can see on eBay, hundreds of dollars for one. And that jumped from, what, 50 or 60 bucks? So it did like a 4x overnight when this was revealed. Now, what is this exactly? We can see. Now, this is over on Tom's Hardware saying Star Wars Racer Revenge, which sports the CUSA 03474 game code, hides a rare vulnerability that lets developers inject code directly into the PlayStation system, an exploit that's quietly evaded patches since the game's 2002 PlayStation 2 debut. Critically, only the PlayStation 4 physical edition, not the PlayStation 2 original, don't buy that one by mistake, is vulnerable to the jailbreak. And I think it's interesting is I guess it'd be something that would be difficult or impossible to patch out at this time. As they mentioned, it's just quietly evaded patches, and I think we're kind of beyond that with the game for any patches that would affect it. But we can see a demonstration of it here from Jazine. And this is it's a 12.00, and that is a big deal because at this time, the PlayStation 5 12.00 jailbreak is still in flux, and there's believed to be one that will be released soonish, but no firm release on that right now. But if you have this disk, you'd be able to run a userland exploit. Now, it'd still be similar to the tethered one, where it only stays active as long as the PlayStation 5 is on. If it power cycles, you'd have to do this all over again. So I did a video showing the PlayStation 4, jailbreaking that and running custom code on it. And that's done through a jailbreak or an exploit through the Blu-ray drive. And that is the same deal. Now, the way you kind of get around that is if you got to turn it off, put it in rest mode. that does not break that exploit. So it'd still be ongoing when you turn it on from rest mode. But the thing people are really hoping for is some kind of kernel level exploit that would allow us to run custom firmware, much like what the PlayStation 3 has. And there's a bit of a breakthrough kind of in that right now through a very weird leak that maybe we'll go over in a separate video later on today, so keep an eye out for that one. As for Star Wars Racer Revenge, I mean, if you have it now and you think you can sell it for a couple $100s, I probably would do it because we've seen this before with many games. I'm thinking about, I think it was Cube Ninja on the 3DS, exploded in price. Then you see what happened with the 3DS hacking scene. It's incredibly easy to exploit the system now without needing it. The price shoots up and then it falls right back down to earth. So, I mean, if you could take advantage of the market now and then maybe buy the game back later, after it probably comes crashing down to earth because there is some serious breakthrough with the PlayStation 5 jailbreaking scene, might be worth cashing in. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about a game that caught my eye, and I just thought it was kind of cool because we talk about wanting creativity in games, and it's kind of hard to find that as much nowadays, but if you look to some of the smaller, maybe new and upcoming titles and studios, you can find some genuinely unique things. So take a look at this. This is a trailer, and it's for a game called FPS Quest. All right, and initially I saw this, and okay, that's, I guess, some fantasy Elder Scrolls looking game. And then all of a sudden it breaks the fourth wall, and I guess you've died so many times, you decide you're just gonna break the game. So you just put in a code, and all of a sudden you have like an assault rifle, and you're running through that with a pistol and just destroying goblins and skeletons. And it looked pretty funny at first, but then it keeps going. So it says that FPS Quest is an FPS first-person shooter where the frame rate, frames per second, is your health. So it seemed like that's in the left-hand corner, and it has like a performance graph that you would expect to see if you were running benchmarks or trying to see maybe how stable a new video card is and what you're getting out of these games at high settings versus medium. So that's pretty fun, but then they even go as far as you obtaining scripts, which they say are abilities that let you use FPS to your advantage. You'll be able to control FPS with your mouse wheel at the cost of temperature, speeding up the game, or slowing it down like a dynamic bullet time. So if you want to drop down to 10 FPS, you can, and then that makes it a bit easier to, of course, take out some of the enemies. Maybe you're in a room full of a bunch of enemies and you want to be able to just headshot everyone. Okay, dropping it to 5 frames per second, kind of mimic bullet time. It's just, these are the creative things I like to see. So I'll have this link down below in the source if you want to check out more about it. From what I can tell right now, it's coming out on Steam, but who knows, maybe if it ends up doing really, really well, it can move to other platforms, as we've seen that with many smaller games that start out as just kind of a fun thing and they're targeting Steam, and then all of a sudden it blows up and it's on all different platforms. So really cool idea, FPS Quest. At least go give it a look, see what you think. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, which is Game of the Year Madness Day 13, Donkey Kong Bonanza versus Battlefield 6, and Donkey Kong Bonanza absolutely smashed it here, crushed it, much as you'd expect for Bonanza. But I mean, 79%, 21% took care of Battlefield 6. But I do want to point out, guys, we had a major upset. Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD Remake did indeed go over Death Stranding 2. That's big time. That is a lower seed, taking out what, I mean, some would have looked at as maybe a favorite even for its part of the bracket. I don't know if it would have won against Expedition or anything like that, but Death Stranding 2 would have been, I think, at least top 8. No, it's out immediately thanks to Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD Remake, and I mean, the Dragon Quest fandom showed up in force, so Dragon Quest 1 and 2 moves on along with Donkey Kong Bonanza. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Mega Masher, who says, I suppose I'm just crazy, but I still don't notice the ghosting that's supposed to be happening on my Switch 2 handheld. Good. I mean, don't let people convince you that you need to see it, because some people just won't. They're just not as sensitive to the ghosting or the slower screen response time for that, the refresh rate. And if that's the case, then don't go looking for it. Seriously, because it might be that situation where you don't see it until you do, and then you can't not see it. And I don't want to be the one that ruins the screen necessarily. I mean, I can see it, but at times when I'm playing, I can kind of look past it depending on the game, and it's something that doesn't bother me as much as other people. So when someone tells me they don't see it, it's just like, oh, great. Some people get kind of annoyed. They're like, oh no, you have to see it. It's objectively bad. Like, it's been measured and stuff. And yeah, that's fine. I would like to see, I mean, I think a Switch 2 OLED, whenever we get there, probably far off in the future now with pricing at this rate, I think that could be the ultimate device from Nintendo with this hybrid model setup. A screen that is like, the Switch 1 OLED, that is a really good screen. It's just hampered by the slower system, the slower chipset and technology now, looking at, from 2017, even before that with the X1 with the 2015. So you get the newer chipset from Nintendo and Nvidia, the OLED screen. That could be an awesome combination. So, I'll be picking that up day one, even though it'll probably be like $1 million or something. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed last week's Newswave, I'll leave it up here in a card. Or maybe you want to check out a cheaper way to emulate all kinds of games, even up to the GameCube and the PlayStation 2 with your phone. I did an entire test with a cheaper, older device, and I'll leave that video right below. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.